In engineering physics, we are discussing radioactivity. In that series, let us try to understand what are the units of radioactivity. How do we measure? So, the radioactivity of a substance is measured in terms of decays per unit time. Number of decays per unit time, how many of them are there? That is the measure of radioactivity, what we call as unit. There are two popular units of activity. One is named after Madame Curie, another is named after the founder, Becquerel. Now, if you see Curie is measured as Ci. So, 1 Curie is defined as 3.7 into 10 power 10 decays per second. And whereas Becquerel, the unit Becquerel is represented as BQ. It is defined as 1 BQ is equal to 1 decay per second. Now, these units, whether it is Curie or Becquerel, they just measure the intensity of radioactive emission. And they do not measure the danger of a given amount of radiation to human beings. For medical purposes and other purposes, the units of radioactivity reflecting the health aspect of radioactive radiation are generally more popular in the medical world. One such unit is something called Gray, represented as GY. A Gray is defined as the amount of energy delivered to the tissue per unit mass. The amount of radiative energy delivered to the tissue per unit mass is referred to as Gray. This is a unit generally used in medical applications. A similar related unit is what is known as Rad, which is equal to 0.001 Guy. 1 Rad is equal to 0.01 joules per kg or 0.01 GY. In order to quantitatively measure the biological damage done by these radiations, a factor called relative biological effectiveness, abbreviated as RBE, relative biological effectiveness, it's a factor. It has been introduced. It is basically to quantitatively measure the biological damage done by these radioactive radiations to the human bodies. Now, in that sense, X-rays of energy 200 kilo electron volts are defined to have an RBE of 1. RBE stands for relative biological effectiveness. Relative biological effectiveness is the unit related to quantitatively measure the biological damage done by the radiations. So, there are various RBA values for radiation, like the one listed here. These are various types of radiations and their equivalent RBE. For example, if you take electrons, RBE range is from 1 to 1.5. For slow neutrons, it is between 3 to 5 RBE. For protons, 10 RBE. For alpha particles, which is nothing but helium nucleus, it is 20 RBE. For all other heavy ions, it is around 20. So, what does this biologically equivalent dose mean? The biologically equivalent dose, or simply called equivalent dose, it is measured in another unit, what is known as sieverts. Sieverts means, this is named after the scientist, this is Sieverts. Sieverts, it is another equivalent dose. It is defined as equivalent dose, 1 SV equal to RBE into absorbed dose. That is in basically GY. That is Gray. So RBE into absorbed dose Gray, which is a more accurate measurement of biological danger posed by a given type of radiation. Of course, another common unit to measure this is something what is known as Roentgen. Roentgen equivalent man. It is called REM. RAM stands for Röntgen Equivalent Man. It is yet another common unit to measure the radioactive intensity. RAM is defined as RBE into RAD, that is absorbed dose. Sieverts is RBE into Gray. RAM is equal to RBE into RAD. So these are various units of radioactivity to measure the terms of damage it can cause to the human beings, as well as number of decays per unit time. That's how we can measure this. So let us understand the uses of radioactive radiation. Now the radiations from radioactive materials can destroy the cells of living bodies. Despite the dangers of overexposure, the radioactive radiations in controlled settings have found a number of useful applications. There are two broad categories of the usage. One is called non-medical usage, another is called medical uses. So if you see the medical uses, they can be used in imaging and then PET. PET stands for position emission tomography. And then you can use them for tumor treatment, you can use them for tracers. These are some applications as far as medical usage is concerned. But when you look at non-medical uses, they are used for carbon dating, sterilization of equipment and food items, etc. So these are basically broad categories of radioactive radiation usages. So let us understand them one after another. First, we shall try to focus on the non-medical application. Understand what is carbon dating application mean, what is sterilization of food and equipment, and then we'll come back to medical application with conclusion. So let us look at one of the important applications, what is known as non-medical application under the name carbon dating. Basically, we talk about carbon 14, C14. Carbon 14 dating is a way of determining the age of certain archaeological artifacts of biological origin up to about 50,000 years old. So that is the maximum limit. So we can find the age of the artifact. So when the particular building was built, like that. Even from fossil analysis also we can go for carbon dating. So it's a method. So carbon 14 dating is a method of or a way of determining the age of certain archaeological artifacts of biological origin up to around 50,000 years. Up to 50,000 years old we can measure. Now this dating technique is used for bone, for cloth, for wood, and even for plant fibers that existed in the relatively recent past. Now how this carbon 14 formation takes place, let us understand. Generally, when you look at the formation of carbon 14, interesting feature can be understood. Every day, cosmic rays enter the Earth atmosphere in large numbers. Very large numbers of cosmic rays enter the Earth atmosphere. For example, every person is hit by about 500,000 cosmic rays every hour. This is the scientific analysis. Because every day cosmic rays are entering the Earth's atmosphere in large numbers. And as an example, if you take a person, every person is supposed to be hit by about 500,000 cosmic rays every year, with or without her notice. In fact, without notice only, we'll get exposed to that, without our notice. So it's common for cosmic ray to collide with an atom in the atmosphere, creating a secondary cosmic ray in the form of an energetic neutron. That is, whenever a cosmic ray is hitting a person, almost, just now I told that every person is on an average is hit by about 500,000 cosmic rays every hour. So it is a common for a cosmic ray to collide with an atom in the atmosphere, creating a secondary cosmic ray in the form of an energetic neutron. So these energetic neutrons collide with the nitrogen atoms. Now, when a neutron collides nitrogen 14, N14 means it has got 7 protons and 7 neutrons. So, nitrogen 14 atoms turn into a carbon 14 atoms. When you say carbon 14 atoms, it is very interesting. 6 protons and 8 neutrons are there. Again, I am repeating. Whenever a cosmic ray collides with an atom in the atmosphere, it creates a secondary cosmic ray in the form of an energetic neutron. These energetic neutrons collide with nitrogen atoms. So when a neutron collides, nitrogen 14, which is basically having 7 protons and 7 neutrons, these nitrogen 14 atoms turn into a carbon 14 atom. Carbon 14 atoms means they got 6 protons and 2 excess neutrons. That means 6 protons and 8 neutrons. And a hydrogen atom. When we say hydrogen atom, it will have 1 proton and 0 neutron. This is interesting. Nitrogen 14 containing 7 protons and 7 neutrons. And that is converting into carbon 14 atoms, which contains 6 protons and 8 neutrons. And also along with it, another is getting released. That is a hydrogen atom, which is 1 proton with 0 neutron. So this is how carbon 14 is being formed. Carbon 14 is a radioactive material. Its half-life period is around 5730 years old. Now let us understand carbon 14 in living things. Now the carbon 14 atoms that cosmic rays create combine with oxygen to form carbon dioxide. Carbon 14 atoms that cosmic rays create combine with oxygen atom to form carbon dioxide, which plants absorb and incorporate into plant fibers by photosynthesis. And from there, animals eat those plants and take the carbon 14 into themselves as well. This is very interesting. How it enters into living things is like this. Carbon 14 atoms that cosmic rays create combine with oxygen to form carbon dioxide, which plants absorb and incorporate into plant fibers by photosynthesis. Animals eat plants and take in carbon 14. So the ratio of normal carbon, that is carbon 12, to carbon 14 in the air and in all living things at any given point of time is nearly constant. Maybe 1 in a trillion carbon atoms is carbon 14. So the carbon 14 atoms are always decaying, but they are being replaced by new carbon 14 atoms at a constant rate. So at this moment, our body has a certain percentage of carbon 14 atoms in it, and all living plants and animals have the same percentage as far as carbon 14 is concerned. Now let us look at dating a fossil. How can you estimate the age? Now, as soon as a living organism dies, naturally it stops taking a new carbon. It can go on taking carbons as long as it is alive. As soon as a living organism dies, it stops taking in a new carbon. So the ratio of carbon 12 to carbon 14 at the moment of death is the same as for every other living being. But the carbon 14 decays and is not replaced. The carbon 14 decays with its half-life of around 5730 years, while the amount of carbon 12 remains constant in the sample. So by looking at the ratio of carbon 12 to carbon 14 in the sample and comparing it to the ratio in a living organism, it is possible to determine the age of a living thing. I am just recapping. Earlier, in carbon 14 in living things, I told you that the carbon 14 atoms that cosmic rays create combine with oxygen to form carbon dioxide. That plants are going to absorb and incorporate that into the plant fibers by photosynthesis. Animals eat plants and take in carbon 14 as well. The ratio of normal carbon, which is carbon 12, to carbon 14 in the air and in all living things at any given time is nearly constant. maybe 1 in a trillion carbon atoms is carbon 14. The carbon 14 atoms are always decaying, but they are being replaced by new carbon 14 atoms at a constant rate. At this moment, our body has a certain percentage of carbon 14 atoms in it, and all living things and plants and animals have the same percentage. When we look at dating a fossil, as soon as a living organism dies, it stops taking in the new carbon. So the ratio of carbon 12 to carbon 14 at the moment of death, it is same as for every other living being. But the carbon 14 decays and is not replaced. The carbon 14 decays with its half-life of 5730 years, while the amount of carbon 12 remains constant in the sample. So by looking at the ratio of C12, that is carbon 12 to C14, carbon 14 in the sample, and then comparing it to the ratio in a living organism, it is possible to determine the age of a living thing. Okay. So therefore the formula to calculate how a old sample is by carbon 14 dating is given as an equation like this. T is equal to log NF by N naught by minus 0.0693 into half-life period. Okay. Half-life period. Here it's a natural logarithm. Ln is nothing but the natural logarithm. NF by N naught is nothing but the percent of carbon 14 in the fossil sample compared to the amount in the living tissue. T half is the half-life period of carbon 14, which is nearly 5700 years. So if a fossil that has, for example, if you want to calculate the half-life, the dating process to calculate how old the sample is using this formula, let us consider a fossil. Assume that the fossil has got a 10% carbon 14 compared to living sample. Then the age of fossil can be calculated like this. Fossil has got 10% carbon 14 compared to the living sample. The age can be calculated as T is equal to natural logarithm of 10% we said 0.10 divided by minus 0.693 into half-life of that is 5700 years. So when you simplify the natural logarithm, it comes to around T is equal to minus 2.303 by minus 0.693 into 5700 years. So this ratio is 3.323 into 5700 years. Therefore, the age can be calculated like this. T is equal to 18,940 years old. That means if you have a fossil comprising 10% of carbon 14 compared to living sample, then its age is found to be 18,940 years old using this formula. This is how archaeological department will calculate the age of a fossil. Because half-life of a carbon 14 is what? 5700 years. Is it not? That is only reliable for dating objects up to about 50 to 60,000 years old. But however, the principle of carbon 14 dating applies to other isotopes as well. For example, if you take potassium 40 is another radioactive element naturally found in our body, and it has a half-life of 1.3 billion years. Other useful radioisotopes for radioactive dating include uranium-235. Uranium-235, it has got a half-life of 704 million years. 704 million years is the half-life of uranium-235. Similarly, if you take uranium-238, its half-life is 4.5 billion years. Thorium-232, its half-life is 14 billion years. Rubidium-87, for example, it has got half-life of 49 billion years. That means using this formula, we can calculate the age of the fossil. This is the dating formula. Because half-life of carbon 14 is 5700 years only. That means from that background, it is only reliable for dating objects up to 50 to 60,000 years. But however, I told you that there is the principle of carbon 14 dating applies to other isotopes also, like potassium 40. It is another radioactive element naturally found in our body. Its half-life period, as I told you, is 1.3 billion years. Apart from that, I told you that other useful radioisotopes for radioactive dating include uranium 235, uranium 238, thorium, rubidium 87, etc. Thorium 232, of course. So the use of various radioisotopes, allows the dating of biological and geological samples with a high degree of accuracy. But however, radioisotope dating may not work so well in future, because anything that died after 1940s, when nuclear bombs, nuclear reactors and open air nuclear tests started changing the environment, it is very harder to date precisely. So that is what we have seen as carbon dating under non-medical applications. Now let us understand the other two non-medical applications, sterilization of equipment and food and smoke detectors, and then come back to medical applications. Let us understand sterilization of equipment and food. The fact that gamma radiations can destroy biological materials or living organisms, this is used in the sterilization of medical equipment. Of course, more controversial is its use is on food, where it is used to destroy organisms that fast and spoilish. In a smoke detector, a low-level radioactive material is present. This radiation can ionize the particles contained in smoke, which are subsequently detected by their charge. Now, when you look at medical uses of radioactivity, radiation plays an increasingly very important role in the diagnosis and treatment of various diseases. For example, if you take imaging in nuclear medicine, looking inside the human body is possible through a huge array of non-invasive techniques. Some of the nuclear medicine imaging techniques combine the use of computers, detectors, and radioactive substances. So these techniques include the list here. Like one is called PET, which is positron emission tomography. PET stands for positron emission tomography, PET. The other one is called SPECT, SPECT. This is single photon emission computed tomography. SPECT stands for single photon emission computed tomography. And of course, there is another type of imaging with respect to radioactivity is cardiovascular imaging. Cardiovascular imaging. And another one is the bone scanning. Now, all these are nothing but techniques, various techniques. So, all these techniques use different properties of radioactive elements to create an image. Nuclear medicine imaging is very much useful for detecting tumors and aneurysms. Aneurysms means weak spots in the blood vessel walls. Irregular or inadequate blood flow to various tissues, blood cell disorders, and inadequate functioning of organs such as thyroid and pulmonary functions of deficiencies. So these can be easily detected with the help of nuclear medicine using radioactive treatment. So the use of any specific test or combination of tests depend on patient symptoms and the disease being diagnosed. That should be, one should be very careful about that. And then when it comes to tumor treatment, radioactive treatment gradually minimizes the problem. It cannot eliminate. So minimized tumor treatment means basically mean radiation is generally used to selectively destroy tumors present in a body like cancerous cells, and damage to healthy cells is controlled. by using radioactive samples with specific half lives, which subsequently are intended to decay very fast. And there are other tracer techniques. What this concept called tracer techniques is all about. The body absorbs various elements and does not discriminate between different isotopes. When you want to know about tracer techniques in nuclear medicine, the body absorbs various elements and does not discriminate between different isotopes. In tracer technique, a radioactive isotope of such an element, for example, iodine you take for thyroid examination. So, a radioisotope of iodine is injected into the body. The signals coming from the ensuing radiation give a picture of the size and location of the area where the isotope has been absorbed. Now, this technique helps to diagnose the metabolism or absorption of food or drugs. Usually, isotopes of relatively short or half-life of the order of minutes or days are generally used to minimize the long-term radiation damages. This is what we need to know about the technique called tracer technique. So let us summarize the entire radioactivity so far discussed. Let us recap and recap the important points to be remembered. We need to understand that radioactivity was discovered accidentally by Henry Becquerel in 1886 while handling the natural minerals containing uranium and other heavy elements. Further studies revealed that these were spontaneously emitted by minerals and consisted of photons, which were called as gamma rays, alpha particles, that is helium nucleus, or beta particles, which are nothing but electrons. Later, it was found that some sources also emit positrons, which is positively charged particles with mass equal to that of electrons. These radiations have different penetrating powers in materials depending on their energies. The activity or strength of a radioactive source is measured in terms of units like Becquerel or Curie. To account for the total biological damage or interaction, units like Gray, RBE, RAD, REM, etc. are used. The standard biological unit of radiation dose in use generally these days is something what is known as sievert. The radioactive material is characterized by its half-life, that is the time taken by the material to decay half of its radioactivity. The radioactive decay is a spontaneous and statistical process and follows the exponential law, which is n equal to n naught into e power minus lambda t, where lambda is the decay constant. So with the decay of parent nuclei, a number of daughter nuclei increases and the radioactive equilibrium is attained. That means when the parent nuclei is decaying, number of daughter nuclei, we observe that they are increasing and the radioactive equilibrium is attained. Till that point, the decay is continuing. This is what we briefly need to know. The important points to be kept in mind here is something what is known as activity, alpha radiation, beta radiation, gamma radiation, half-life. These are the key terms that have to be kept in mind while understanding the radioactivity. So this is what we need to know about radioactivity.